Well, good afternoon. It is good to see you all virtually here on Morning Cheer Mondays. I am here in Northeast at Sandy Cove on our property. It's a beautiful sunny day, maybe a little bit too hot, but we'll take it, especially after all the craziness and the weather that we've got. We like it when it's not raining, and so it's a good day here. I'm in my offices and I'm excited to share another friend with you today who will have a great conversation and talk about what's going on in his life and in his ministry. But I wanted to let you know about a few different opportunities that we have going on that we've decided to kind of continue doing. So if you're kind of sitting at home planning for this month or the next month, as kind of our worlds become a little more certain, we get a little bit of clarity into what next looks like. We've been offering something called a power boost, and you can find all this information on our website, sandycove.org. And it's essentially kind of a hotel with the amenities that we can offer. So we've got the pool open for as long as we can keep it open, and the waterfront with kind of non-powered motorsports, and basically the opportunity to be at Sandy Cove. And we have our food set up in a way where we can deliver it safely to you with indoor and outdoor seating options. And then we're going to put together a package probably that'll roll out in the next few weeks here for a couples getaway package. So if you are a couple that's looking to get away and just kind of have a little bit of time together, we're going to have a package catered just for you. We're actually working with some vendors in town where you can actually experience a little bit of the town of Northeast as well as your stay here, and we're pretty excited about that. And then obviously we love to have groups here. We've got a group in house right now that's able to meet safely under all the guidelines that we have through CDC and the state. And so we're running some group specials as well. So if there's a group of you that want to come together, we'd love to figure out how to walk alongside of you and provide a safe environment. Obviously, we're still adhering to all of the restrictions that we need to. But as you've probably heard me say it here and other places, there's a whole list of what COVID's told us that we can't do, but there's a long list of things that we can do. And so we're leaning into that as a ministry and figuring out what opportunities we can do to provide you safety while you're here, but also provide you the opportunity to experience the mission and vision of our property as we've been called to steward it. And people have been coming all summer and having a great time. This is the last week of our day camp. We've enjoyed serving our local community. The Marsh has been able to serve probably greater than 80 kids each week in a safe way. And so we're grateful for our team that's down there delivering that. So a lot of exciting things that we're trying to figure out what next is. We are for sure taking the long view on this. We realize that while it feels like, I think for me personally, if I'm being honest, I thought by now we'd kind of be over kind of the, like the initial strike of COVID and figuring some things out. But I realize that it feels like the end zone just kind of keeps getting moved further away from us as we run. And at the end of the day, you wake up and you readjust and realize that none of this is a surprise to God. He has a plan. And I walk by a big billboard every day as I walk into the building that says Jesus never fails. And I know that that's true. And so we're just taking it one day at a time, praying for our daily bread. And he's been amazingly providing for us in ways through donors, many of whom I'm sure are watching, people who have come along the ministry to pray, and those who come and are participating have been part of the reason why we're open and still doing what we're doing. So we're grateful to be able to do what we do, but we've had to become creative. And one of the creative things that we did is to go back to kind of our roots where we came out of a radio ministry. Now we're going to both YouTube Live and Facebook Live and bringing you friends of ours that we know through relationships of having them here as speakers. And so I want to introduce you to one of my favorite people to follow and hear. He is probably, I'll go ahead and say probably one of the wisest, youngest guys I know. And I'll say that because I think he's younger than I am. But he's definitely wiser than I am, and you'll see that really quickly. So let me go ahead and introduce you to my friend, Rich Villodas, who is joining us from New York City. You're technically in New York City, right? Is that a real?
I'm in Queens, New York City. Yep.
That's it. And the Mets jersey to prove it. He is legit. In New
10
York.
minutes from Citi Field.
Can you go ahead and, for those who might not know who you are or anything about your ministry, just tell us a little bit about your family, your ministry, and what you're involved in right now?
Yeah, I am the son of Richard and Nicolasa Villodas from New York City, Brooklyn, born in Brooklyn, the husband to Rosie. and father to 6-year-old Nathan and 11-year-old Karis. So we've been married now. It'll be 14 years, 15 years in January. We just hit 14 years. So I was doing some mental math here.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm 10 years in January. So what day in January did y'all get married?
January 28th, which they thought would be a blizzard, and it turned out to be like a beautiful 55-degree day. So
yeah. Yep. We were on Martin Luther King weekend on a Sunday, and it was the same thing. It snowed 2 days before and the day after, but the day of, we ended up getting amazing photos outside because it was unseasonably warm that one day.
Yeah, awesome.
So we're spoiled there. Well, tell us a little bit about the ministry you serve right now, a church. So tell us a little bit about the makeup and where that is.
Yeah, I pastor New Life Fellowship Church in Queens, New York City. Our church is about 33 years old. I joined 12 years ago to be on the preaching team and oversee small group ministry. And some 7 years ago became the lead pastor, succeeding a guy by the name of Pete Scazzaro, who planted the church. A beautiful congregation. Folks from over 75 nations are represented. Half of Queens is foreign born, so it's a multiracial, multi-ethnic, socioeconomically diverse immigrant congregation. And so been here 7 years as a lead pastor, 12 years, and it's been a beautiful ride so far.
And Pete is still involved with the church in some capacity, or just in relationship with you?
Whatever he wants these days. I mean, when he transitioned 7 years ago from being the lead pastor, we still were pretty understaffed in terms of we didn't have an executive pastor, and so he felt like he had to help me out a lot. So the first couple of years, his finger was in a whole lot of things in very appropriate ways, just trying to help me. By year 4, he was like, I can't be doing this. So I was like, do whatever you want. So he's around from time to time. And as the years has gone on, he's kind of disappeared more and more. So I've tried to get him to do stuff, but he's really taken this thing seriously. Like, he's moved on. So I'm trying to give him work to do, but he refuses every time.
Well, I want you to be able to talk a little bit. It's in, I think, mid-September. This is your first book that's being released. I have that right?
That is correct. A Deeply Formed Life, September 15th.
Tell me a little bit about what the book is about, and kind of, I want to hear a little bit of the story of, like, where did it birth out of? Where did that bubble up? Books kind of come out of something. Where did it come out of?
Well, I'll go to that first. It really comes out of our congregation. And what I write about really is the 5 particular values that make up our congregation that has profoundly shaped my life as well over many years. When I became the pastor at New Life, the lead pastor in 2013, Pete and I were talking about, how do we encapsulate the values that make New Life what it is? And we didn't have this language before, and we came up with 5 M's to really talk about what we've been doing over 3 decades and what we believe is the future of Christian discipleship and formation for the church in this particular cultural moment we find ourselves in. And so those 5 values serves as the genesis of the book. And so I write not out of just a theological reflection. I write out of being with people and seeing their lives deeply formed through these particular values. And so it emerged out of a particular congregation, mixed in now with my reflection. And the 5 values that I write about are all values that I think we need in this particular moment that we live in. So those are contemplative rhythms, racial justice, interior examination, sexual wholeness, and missional presence. And so each one of those can be individually valued, and I think they're important. What we've discovered at New Life is those 5 values held together serve as a really powerful paradigm that in which these values are often not held together in various churches or in people's lives. And so it's often the case you are a person who's for justice, but don't necessarily have a contemplative life, or someone who's engaged in evangelism but does not know how to look within. And so we're trying to hold these together. So it comes out of our church. These 5 individual values, I think, are necessary for this particular moment, but even more powerfully is holding these values together. So that's what I'm trying to attempt in this book.
Yeah, that's I love that you have spoken to it relative to where we are.
Yeah.
But I would almost, as I hear you explaining it, if COVID hadn't happened, the book would still be absolutely appropriate, because I do think that a lot of what the church is dealing with, it's been maybe amplified because of COVID. It's exposed a lot of things where, what you could hide behind is no longer there. That's true of our ministry. We realized our business model was fragile, and we knew that before, but when you take away all of our attendees, it exposes how fragile we really are. And I think that the church in America, not to lump everyone together, but I think the Western church, for sure, I've seen and experienced where it does feel like there are churches who take one of those areas and they just go, hey, this is where we are. And then probably, if I had to guess, a lot of that really is shaped based on what the pastors kind of, where they're coming from. But I do think, even in my own personal walk, I realize that by the time, if I do fall into the trap of like, hey, I'm going to chase this, I'm going to chase a more contemplative life, I realize that in pursuing it, it exposes that other plates start falling. And so I love the idea of recognizing that it has to it can't be done singularly. It has to be done in tandem. And I think it's pretty countercultural. And it doesn't surprise me to hear that it comes out of your church experience, because your church probably looks a lot different than many of ours that are watching,
Yeah. And which is why I think the book has within itself some credibility, because again, it's not just coming from my isolated reflection and go, we've been at this for 3 decades. Sure. And we've seen people's lives impacted. Are we a perfect church? Not at all. Does everyone hold on to the Sabbath? Not really. Is everyone on board in terms of racial justice? Not a chance. However, what we've seen is over time, these values, because we have clearly articulated them in many different ways in our church history, has taken root in lots of people. And we want a holistic way of following Jesus in the world. We just don't want to be about prayer. We don't just want to be about race. We just don't want to be about self-reflection. We just don't want to be about evangelism. We want to hold all these things together. And so it's difficult, but I don't think it's impossible.
Yeah, I guess I'm sitting here with a million questions of curiosity, but one of the questions I guess I would speak to out of kind of my own ignorance and curiosity is how do you teach any one of these but keep it in light of all 5 of them? Like, what's the way in which you've kind of built into your rhythms and culture to make sure that you don't kind of rabbit hole into only talking about justice or only talking about evangelism? How do you do that from just a practical teaching way?
Yeah, and one way, we don't limit what we teach on Sunday morning. So Sunday morning is a really important. Every Sunday is a catalytic moment to rehash the vision as to why we are following Jesus. What does it mean to be the church? And in our particular local context, what does it mean to embody these values? And so Sunday morning has an important aspect of doing that. But we also have, whether it's our small group communities, whether it's our particular discipleship pathway in which we create intentional spaces for people to engage this material. Every year we have a gospel and race conference that we expose many of our leaders to. And so in terms of my preaching, in a given week, you're going to hear 1 or 2 or 3 of those values. Whether it's a one line in the message, whether it takes up 5 minutes in the message, but there's going to be every single week some sense of continuity that they're hearing this on a regular basis. And then when you factor in all the various other discipleship spaces. People are getting hopefully a good balanced spiritual formation diet throughout the course of a given year. That notwithstanding, there are particular seasons where we have to go deeper into one area. And so in light of the racial tensions that exist in our world, we're going to spend a lot more time focusing on racial tensions, but we're going to do it in a way where we're not just talking about race from an interpersonal or personal perspective. We're going to talk about it from an institutional perspective. We're going to talk about it on many different layers. We're going to combine this notion of interior examination and racial justice. And so that's my hope is that the gift of these values is that we're able to hold multiple angles together to try to get at what it means to follow Jesus in this world.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I don't know if you remember it, but I remember because it was very pivotal in my own journey. When you were here on our property to teach during a family camp, we stole away for just a short amount of time to talk a little bit about race and the gospel, and your encouragement of what to read, as well as just even the framework about how to think about race in the context of ministry and the gospel was so powerful to me. And I'm really grateful for it, because I do think I think it centered me as I was on a journey to figuring things out for myself. And knowing that obviously has been one of the many crises that our culture is dealing with, not just the pandemic, but as we look at race relations. Can you speak a little bit to just maybe even how did your church respond when you do have a cultural moment that's palpable? It's something that can't be ignored, and the church has a responsibility, I think, to speak to it. Can you speak a little bit to how you view race in the gospel? Because it was really formative in me. I'd love for our viewers to see that as well.
In terms of how we responded, in one way, our response was it was uneventful, in that we're always talking about this. And so we didn't have to swing the pendulum to say, all right, we got to stop everything we're doing to address this. On a regular basis, we are talking about the reality of race and racism in our culture. And so whether it comes out through a message that I'm giving, I mean, in a given week, every sermon, you're going to hear me say something about race. And again, it might be a line or it might be 5 minutes. So how we responded, did I have a message for the particular? I remember preaching on Pentecost Sunday while there were cities that were, on fire. And, I gave a specific message for that particular moment. But honestly, Stephen, it was pretty uneventful. Now, I know that lots of churches, for some of them, it was emotionally disorienting because they said, we have to now address this. But for us, and I think that's where I would hope churches and leaders would move towards, where to talk about race doesn't feel like a Herculean task to change everything we're doing. We got to have a big board meeting. What are we going to say? This should be as normal. And so when I think about the gospel, I think the gospel we cannot be reduced to any kind of atonement theory. The gospel cannot be reduced to a post-mortem kind of experience where after you die, you go to heaven. The gospel is the message that Jesus Christ, in his death, in his resurrection, in his ascension, is Lord, is King, and he's making all things new. And part of the newness through which he is creating a whole new existence is through a new family. And that family is called the church. It's called the body of Christ. And it is a family that transcends all the categories in our society that tends to keep people away from each other. Jesus Christ is Lord. He's created a new family so that all things might be made new. I think if the gospel is framed in that way, it makes it a lot easier to address the racial tensions that come to the surface. So my hope is that I think whenever I talk about, there are two words that I have to repeatedly define and redefine to keep on mission. And it is, what is the gospel and what is racism? And unless we are consistently defining and redefining those two terms, we're going to have a hard time, I think, being faithful to Jesus and following him in all of the layers as in terms of what it means to address these matters in a faithful, gospel-shaped, Jesus-saturated way. So, but it was pretty uneventful for us at New Life.
Yeah, no, that as you were explaining that, I realized that probably did make sense, that because this was not a new topic to address as it was for many churches. And I think, as you described it, I think there were churches that looked at it as, oh, wow, I probably should think about that. But one of the things that you said to me early in the journey that shaped me was, and I'll butcher it, so you can clean it up if you want it to get tweeted properly, but it was something along the lines of, you can't view this as I need to preach the gospel and also get race right. Like, you have to see them as integrated. Like, you can't, they're not separate. And it really did kind of make me chase after, where does race fit inside of the context of gospel? And as a parachurch organization, to go, hey, if we're a ministry that's committed to the gospel, it will have to address race. And we're kind of on a journey to normalizing, so it's not Herculean in task when we talk about it and address it. But I'm very grateful for your. I think we probably sat maybe for 10 minutes, but it was a powerful 10 minutes in my journey a couple of years ago, to kind of where I feel like where I've gotten, where we've arrived today. So, and I'll ask this question just because I want to see your reaction to it. But in a Western culture that's so obsessed with, okay, but how do you measure it and how do I know when I'm there? Would you say, in the context of the deeply formed life and this model that your church is doing, is that baked in, or is that just something that doesn't work because it's Western and you're not really teaching a Western idea?
In terms of measuring it?
Yeah. As far as, like, if I read this, let's, from I'm not saying this as myself, but I'll play the role of, every man and say, if I read your book, how do I know I got there? Like, how do I come back to your church and go, look, I'm deeply formed. Like, I arrived. Like, is that too Western, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the challenge of titling it "Formed" makes it seem as if it's settled. And that's the limit of that title. I mean, you could argue it should be the deeply forming life, that it's an ever going, ever unfolding journey of being formed by Jesus. In short, I think for me, the question that I would ask someone upon reading the book is, and this is the hope that the book sets people on a particular trajectory. And that particular trajectory is one in which they are more prayerful. They are more open to self-examination and looking within. They are open to recognizing the multi-layered reality of race and racism. That they are open to seeing the connection between their sexuality and their spirituality. They're open to seeing their lives on. So for me, it's more my hope in many respects is that this book serves, probably not the best metaphor here, but as a gateway drug to exploring the vastness of Christian formation and Christian theology and spirituality in these 5 areas. And so if I could introduce someone to other ways of thinking through these 5 values, for me, I think my job is done well there. So I don't think it's a matter of there's no finality to it. There's no, when I reach this point, I think the question though is my life on a particular trajectory to continuing to grow as a follower of Jesus in this way?
No, that's good, and I, not far off what I expected. I think that it matches up for us. We talk a lot about, in our vision statement, we talk about wanting to build healthy families, and then we unpack that to say we're not building perfect families because we don't believe that exists, but we do believe that healthy exists. And when you talk about healthy, there is the option to be healthier.
Yeah,
I had a counselor once who said a doctor will never want you to believe this, or they can't say it and not get in trouble, but smoking 10 cigarettes is better than smoking 20. Now the best choice you can make is smoking no cigarettes at all. but
Yeah.
10 is better than 20. And so there is, and even our internship program that we have here called Converge, that we talk about, students that are on a journey, and we don't promise that in 1 year's time, you're going to be deeply formed.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are at a 2, we're going to hope that you're closer to a 3 or a 4 by the time you leave us.
Yeah. And we're asking this question now at New Life. We're starting a leadership development program starting next month. And we've asked that question: how do we know? How do you measure? And I don't know if there's certain things you can measure in terms of, okay, how much time are you spending in prayer? How many journal entries have you done in terms of your own inner exploration? How many books have you read on race? I mean, there's some of those ways, but ultimately the question is, are you moving? Are you in a particular trajectory to move into greater understanding and greater exploration internally about these issues? So, I mean, that's the hope for me, that people are moving in that direction.
Yeah, that's my language with our teams. We talk about, I define health as which direction are your feet pointed.
Yeah.
Are you pointed in your spiritual health? Are you pointed towards the cross? Or are you pointed away? In your physical health, are you pointed towards the refrigerator or the gym? Where are your feet pointed? Because where you're headed is a determiner that will help to determine your health. And so that kind of lines up a good bit with what it sounds like you're talking about inside of this. And I do, I do resonate with the fact that there are characteristics, especially when you go down to a leadership lane, there's characteristics of leaders. Most leaders that I respect, they're very well read, and so you go, okay, there's probably something there. Now, I think what I would say is my hardwiring is I want to systematize everything and go, all right, well then 2 books a week, then you'll become the best leader that you can. And if you don't, then you're a failure and your feet are pointed the wrong way. And so I have to kind of undo that and realize that everybody's journey is gonna look a little different. I didn't really read much till I was much older in life, but fell in love with it quickly and can see kind of my growth accelerating once I did.
Yeah. And in terms of just measuring, I mean, to measure our development is one of the ongoing struggles of my life. And so in one way, I want to see, am I following Jesus well? At the same time, I think God calls me to a kind of holy unawareness of my own development, where Jesus talks about, in terms of in the Sermon on the Mount, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing in terms of generosity. I think there's what he's getting at there is there should be an unawareness that we have about our own goodness. And I think paradoxically, the more unaware we are about our own growth and development, I think the better we are. The challenge is I want to measure it. And every time I find myself measuring, I find myself now subjected to pride, subjected to a false sense of growth and such. So it's my ongoing struggle that I think I'll wrestle with for the rest of my life.
I think the other pitfall for me is that when I go to measure, I want to find something to measure against. And so then I get into this comparison thing that gets really unhealthy, that says, all right, well, who's my peers and where are they? Because I'm at this age and stage, I should have had that figured out because they obviously do. And so I think I resonate with that as well, to go, if ever I want to put a measuring stick on things, there's a really unhealthy way to do it. And I'm likely to do that. But for me, it's comparison is kind of the one that will creep in quickly. And I have to kind of go like, not my journey, that's not what it's about. So give us some of the details. The book, you can pre-order it now through kind of all providers.
Yeah. If someone went to just richvillodas.com, you could, there's plenty of options there to purchase. They could pre-order it. Sometime later this week, we'll be putting out a link, and I'll put it on my social media, what have you, where the ebook should be available to everyone if they pre-order the book, so they could start reading it now a month before it actually comes out. And so that should be available sometime later this week. But yes, September 15th is when we officially go live with launching the book.
Are there plans based on the nature of the book and it's kind of coming out of your church rhythms? Is there anything kind of in the plans for group study or implementation into church settings that you've got kind of in the works for that?
Yeah, the hope for, I write, my first audience is New Life Fellowship. And so when I write with the people in my community in mind. I want them, we're going to be creating a small group discussion guide to help people go through this. There'll probably be one created pretty soon, and then something a bit more robust to really engage the material well. But yeah, the hope, I think a book like this requires a community of people to wrestle with the ideas and the practices and the theology there. So the hope is that in hopefully in the coming month or so, there should be some available resource related to group discussion and such.
Nice. Fantastic. Well, you talked about you got a website. What are the ways that people stay in touch with you beyond if they're just meeting you for the first time today?
Yeah, if they're on Twitter, it's just at Rich Villodas. That's where most of the time I'm a preacher, so I find myself preaching and testing ideas out on Twitter. And so that's always a fun space for me, and to talk about sports from time to time. So that's the same handle at Instagram as well. And then on Facebook, if you just look my name up, folks can find me there.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, I was talking with Nate, who runs programs here, and I had a moment where I was reading kind of succession of things you had put on Facebook. I'm like, I find myself wanting to share everything you post. There's really some depth to what you fit into a few words. God's given you a gift for sure, and especially over this season, not just in race, but just in what we've been dealing with. I'm really grateful for you being faithful to your calling, for putting things out so that others can share it, because I know I'm not the only person that's hitting the share button on things that you've said that help to give words to things that are going on inside of me, but I can't get them together like you can. So despite your sports allegiances, I will tell you that I love you and I'm grateful for you. And I look forward to whenever we are doing in-person things again for you all to be here, because we benefit from your teaching, and we're grateful to have you as part of our network.
Well, just a big shout out to you guys. Last year, I was at Sandy Cove for a week and was the speaker for that week. And you guys did an exceptional job. And so anyone watching this year, I'd highly recommend Sandy Cove as a beautiful place for a family retreat, a family space for recreation. And so beautiful facility. My kids were very sad that we couldn't go this week. So it's a testament to the good work that you guys are doing.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, I appreciate you making time for us here today, and please go follow, check out, and pre-order the book, and I'm sure you will be blessed by it. And so thank you, Rich, for making time for us today to have a conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rich. Well, we're so grateful to have friends of our ministry that come alongside of us, that teach and understand and are gifted in such a way. I would definitely recommend that you go ahead, follow him on all social media, go ahead and get the book, and then look forward to kind of the next few chapters that are coming up in his life. And keep out on our website to see the events that are coming, because you'll see his name listed as a speaker in the future for sure, as long as he keeps taking the invitation up. So we look forward to that the next time, and look forward to the next time that we get to gather together. Right now, we're kind of watching the movie, and Maryland is doing okay. And so we're following the regulations. We're providing a safe opportunity, but we're open and looking forward to when we can be together. And for those that missed out on family camp, we missed it too. And we're hoping that things are less restricted next year and we can do something that feels and looks a lot more like family camp. So thank you all for tuning in today. I hope it blessed you, and look forward to seeing you again. Check out Thursday midday with Andrea, 12:30, same places, Facebook Live, YouTube Live. And remember, Jesus never fails. Thanks, everybody.